Thank you, Mr Deputy Speaker. Can I welcome the Minister to his place, and can I also start by congratulating my honourable and gallant friend, the member for Barnsley Central, for bringing this very important bill for debate here today. And I know he's been working very closely with civil servants and the previous ministers at the Department for Business, Energy and Industrial Strategy to produce a workable bill that can pass through this House. And the legislation before us today, which does have cross-party support, which is very evident from the contributions we've heard today, but also is, I believe, those of us that have been in this place for any length of time know how difficult it is to get cross-party support, especially on a private member's bill. So I think it is a direct testament of his hard work that we are in this place, and I know honourable members from across the House will join me in congratulating him on that point. Can I also thank the previous minister who is in her place, the honourable member for Loughborough, for the fantastic work I know through conversations that she has done in this area, and indeed the honourable member for Basingstoke, who isn't in her place today, but I understand has done a considerable amount of work in this area, and I think it's important to record that here today. I also want to, Mr Deputy Speaker, pay thanks to other honourable members for their contribution during today's debate. And I have to say, actually, before I do that, I feel the Conservative whips today will be very pleased with the honourable gentleman for Barnsley Central, as he has taken somewhat of a burdensome task of nominating a number of members on the committee at the committee stage off their hands today, and done that in a very masterful way. And indeed, I was sat there admiring and learning at the same time on how it's done. But can I genuinely thank honourable members from across the House, and I think the honourable member for Loughborough made this point. We are at our best when we come together, and it is absolutely right that we should come together on matters that are of huge importance, as highlighted. And I want to thank the honourable member for Beckenham, who in his customary style of combining humour with passion, along with some very serious points, I think spoke very well. And of course, I think all will take away his fine point about women being far more superior than men, certainly a point I would never disagree with. Also, my honourable friend, the member for Hampstead and Kilburn, spoke very passionately and gave some real-life examples in her own constituency, and actually highlighted, very importantly, the broader impact that this has on families and children. The honourable member for West Bromwich West gave a very passionate speech where he spoke from personal experience, but actually made a really good point around that actually good employers would welcome this legislation for all the right reasons. The honourable member for Loughborough, I've already thanked her, but was quite rightly pointed out that this legislation does extend to shared parental leave and adoption leave, and quite rightly and importantly. So the honourable member for the cities of London and Westminster cited constituency examples and gave personal experience, which I think everybody would agree with the importance of the cases she pointed out. The honourable member for Chipping, right honourable member for Chipping Barnet, quite rightly highlighted the benefits to employees as well as employers, and the very valuable point around increased productivity that this will clearly have. The Honourable Member for Ashfield made, I think, a very pertinent point, and perhaps one that the theme of which actually runs through all members' contributions here today, is that it is tragic that we are in the year 2020. It is shocking and tragic that we are having to address this form of discrimination. And tragically, he is right that the discrimination starts way before the pregnancy in the workplace, and he highlights some very important points. And the Honourable Member for Motherwell and Wishaw cited again a harrowing personal experience with the civil service from the past, but was visibly still, naturally and understandably, still quite moved, and gave equally moving examples from her constituency again. But I'm very grateful to all the honourable members who have spoken today, and spoken very well, Mr Deputy Speaker, all highlighting the importance. And in the theme of what we've heard, Mr Speaker, the measures in this bill seek to extend the protections from redundancy afforded for maternity leave, adoption leave and shared parental leave beyond the date on which their leave ended, and strengthen the protections afforded in pregnancy. And as we have also heard, these protections are desperately needed, with Maternity Action, Unison, the TUC and others finding that many employees are still being unfairly dismissed by being made redundant. Now, a number of honourable members quite rightly cited reports including the 2015 Equality and Human Rights Commission finding that 54,000 new mothers may be forced out of their jobs as a result of compulsory redundancy or being treated so poorly that they had no option but to leave, which was followed by a report from the Women and Equalities Committee that found rather alarmingly more discrimination and poor treatment at work for pregnant women and mothers than a decade ago, which is something that should shock the whole House. If these figures are not alarming enough, the campaign group, again referenced by a number of honourable members, Pregnant Then Screwed, found that over 1 in 10 women in 2020 who were pregnant had either been made redundant or expected to be made redundant, with almost 2 in 3 believing that their pregnancy and motherhood was a factor. Whilst the TUC report that some women are also being forced to take sick leave or unpaid leave because their workplace was no longer safe for them, whilst pregnant and their employer refused to make the adjustments required. Mr Deputy Speaker, as pointed out by almost every speaker that has spoken before me, this is frankly disgraceful that in 2022 discrimination against new mothers and new mothers-to-be still exists in the workplace, and bad bosses feel that they can flout employment law with impunity without consequence or retribution. And it could not be clearer that the existing protections for pregnant women falls far below the standard that we should expect in this country. With over 15 million women aged 16 and over in employment between April and June this year, and an increase to 72% in the female employment rate, many of whom may choose to take periods of leave to have a family, and with the right to a family life also a key human right, protecting those who choose to start and raise a family from unfair dismissal must be a key priority for us in this House and for the government. That's why Labour's New Deal for Working People, published last year, makes a firm commitment to enshrine in law stronger protections that make it unlawful for an employer to dismiss a woman who is pregnant, whilst also extending statutory maternity and paternity leave, and why I'm not only pleased that my honourable friend has brought this bill today, but that the government are supportive of the proposals, even if it has tragically taken them more than 3 years since consulting on this issue to get to the point where we now see legislation begin to make its way through Parliament. However, as pointed out by my honourable friend for Barnsley Central, whilst the opposition front bench, of course, support this bill, we nevertheless have a number of concerns around the shortcoming of the government's policies that will leave the protection which he proposes in his bill today weaker than what he understands. And I do want to point out it is in good spirit. I think the Minister will note from the tone of my speech, it is meant in good spirit, because he will have noticed from the strength of the debate today, the passion that is felt on, quite rightly, on all sides of the House to make this legislation as strong as possible to afford as many of those protections as possible. So firstly, Mr Deputy Speaker, my concern is around the government's plans to raise awareness amongst employers of the changes that will be made in the regulations brought about following the bill. Employers of all sizes must be made aware of their existing statutory responsibilities to those who are pregnant and those who are taking maternity, adoption and shared parental leave, even before we get to the strengthened protections my honourable friend proposes. For as we have heard today, many employers are flouting the protections that currently exist, either deliberately knowing that they can get away with it, or inadvertently because they simply do not know what protections the law affords pregnant women or those taking parental leave. It's clear that if we are to make progress, the Minister, in my view, should have a hands-on approach to regulation and must ensure that employers are made aware, and I hope that they are able to confirm today the actions that they will be taking, spread awareness amongst employers of existing and new protections. I mean, the point equally has been made by a number of honourable members today. The issue of upholding and enforcing rights also takes me neatly on to my next point around the current backlog in employment tribunals. As has been pointed out, the bill today and the regulations set to be made by the Minister will not apply a comprehensive blanket ban on making a pregnant woman or those on parental leave redundant, but only strengthen their chances of making a successful claim of unfair dismissal through the employment tribunal system. But as anyone who has tried to hold their employer to account through the employment tribunal system for a breach of employment law will know, the situation in the system is beyond dire. With a backlog of over 500,000 single and multiple claims, that means it can be up to 2 years after a claim is made that someone will have their case heard. Faced with such a backlog, it is simply no wonder that such a high proportion of people withdraw their claims, and if the Minister intends for the protections afforded by this bill and forthcoming regulations to have any effect, he must tackle this backlog as a matter of immediate priority. Those made, Mr Speaker, those made redundant and unfairly dismissed from their employment whilst pregnant or on parental leave must also have much greater flexibility in making an employment tribunal claim, which is why our New Deal for Working People proposes extending the time limit on bringing an employment tribunal claim so that no one is forced into making a hasty claim to an employment tribunal before allowing ACAS and their trade union to reach a settlement with their employer, and so that anyone who has recently had a child doesn't have to face the additional pressures of making a claim in those hectic first 3 months when, I think everybody will agree, when caring for their child comes before their own well-being. However, as has been pointed out, the bill does not propose imposing a blanket ban on redundancies during this new extended period that the Minister must define in secondary legislation. This leaves real concerns, Mr Deputy Speaker, that this will not go far enough in stopping discrimination against pregnant women in the workplace and those on parental leave, nor sufficiently protect them from redundancy, and concerns that it will not be clear enough to employers. As the Minister knows, and my honourable friend again for Barnsley Central pointed this out. The German model offers a clear and pragmatic standard which the UK can adopt and adjust. And whilst my honourable friend from Barnsley Central has gone through the German model point for point, so I don't seek to repeat that for the sake of repetition. I think it's on the record and all members were here when he made those points. And I would be grateful, actually, for again, in all sincerity, for a response from the Minister as to why the government cannot adopt this model beyond claiming that it would be too difficult to implement. The qualifying period to obtain the additional protection offered after a period of leave is also a worry. Now, this point, to my understanding, hasn't been made here today, but I believe is an equally important point, as those most in need of protection are those who are forced to curtail their leave, tragically, before the 6th week because of personal, often financial circumstances. These individuals should not be excluded from the extended protections being offered because of their circumstances and their need to curtail their leave. And I again hope the Minister will look again at this issue when regulations are being into effect are being drafted. Lastly, Mr. Speaker, is my concerns around the legislation itself, as whilst this bill is the first step in introducing stronger protections for those on parental leave, the journey culminates in the Secretary of State making regulations that actually apply and specify the protections. However, as far as I can see, there is nothing compelling the Secretary of State to introduce these regulations by a certain date. And having covered this brief for some time, I am more than a little used to the government promising action and tragically not following through on many important issues. I mean, for example, the ethnicity pay gap reporting, which keeps getting kicked into the long grass, and a number of legislation that mysteriously enters into the in due course world, which we never see come back. And the other point I wish to make is private members' bills, tragically, in some cases, very rarely make it onto the statute books because the government refuses to make time for them in committee. I therefore hope the Minister will confirm the date for the bill to pass through its committee stage. I know there may be a provisional date, and it would just be nice to get that confirmation. Mr. Deputy Speaker, all of these concerns could have been addressed if only the government had introduced and passed, as they said they would almost 3 years ago, an employment bill firstly announced in 2019 in the Queen's speech, then pushed back to the point in due course, a time when it seems, like I've stated, many of the government's plans, and in particular those in Bays, will take place, only to now seemingly be scrapped with no mention in the Queen's speech earlier this year. This employment bill would have provided a means for the government to strengthen protections for pregnant women and those on parental leave years ago, as well as much more. Mr. Deputy Speaker, in closing today, I want to be clear, we absolutely support the bill before us today and applaud the work done by my honourable friend for Barnsley Central. I want to again thank honourable members from across the House and the spirit in which this debate has been conducted today, and actually in the powerful contributions we've heard from members on all sides of the House. And I hope, given the strength of feeling, given the sincerity in which we've all spoken today, the Minister will look at making concessions with regards to the points that I raised, particularly around ensuring that the regulations that they will make can actually be upheld and enforced. Thank you, Mr. Deputy Speaker.
Minister. Thank you, Mr Deputy Speaker, and it's an absolute pleasure to follow the Honourable Member for Bradford East and thank him for his contribution and also his questions. I'll do my best to cover them. If not, hopefully we can cover them separately as we move forward. I'd also truly like to thank the Honourable and Gallant Member for Barnsley Central for bringing this important legislation forward. And I would like to thank all of the Honourable Members who have spoken on this important matter today, including North East Fife, Hampstead and Kilburn, West Bromwich West, Cities of London and Westminster, Beckenham, with his incredibly powerful and moving comments, Ashfield and Chipping Barnet, and Motherwell and Wishaw. I will come to some of the key points from them as I progress. I'd also really, truly like to echo the thanks to my predecessors from the Honourable and Gallant Member from Barnsley Central. Really, I often say that anyone in these roles stands on the shoulders of giants, and I'm very fortunate that, you know, I'm building on the work from the Honourable Member for Loughborough, who has just been phenomenal with her work, and even more so, if I may say, the member for Sutton and Cheam, who I know have helped us get to this today, and I am aware of work very closely with him to support this. The Honourable and Gallant Member for Beckenham and the Honourable Member for Chipping Barnet both predicted what I was about to say in their own speeches, which is that I am certainly pleased to confirm that the government will be supporting this bill, and look forward to working with him at the committee stage. And I did note that we did talk a lot today about recruitment, and I thought he did an amazing job of recruiting many members to his committee. I think there were perhaps, hopefully, more women on the committee than men. I wasn't quite keeping count. And I stand here today, I have to say, from a personal perspective, pleased to support this bill. I'm a father of an inspirational daughter, the husband to an incredible and smart wife, a son to a mother who was loving and hardworking and still is, a sister who was a cancer survivor and has had the challenges that she's had to face and dealt with them with such kindness and strength, and an uncle to two beautiful nieces. And I think when we look at what this bill is trying to do, it's to support women and girls as well for the future in being able to just feel a true equality in their lives and in the workplace. And I think this bill certainly signals that to all of those. And I think really this is another example of where this Parliament and this chamber works so well together. You know, when we support each other, when we challenge each other, I think we get to the best legislation, and we show the country actually that we are all compassionate in what we do, and we all believe in getting the legislation right. And that often means that things take a bit more time, but the truth is they take time because the trouble, as we find, is that the very small numbers of businesses that are unscrupulous, and we heard some of the comments earlier from, especially movingly from the member for Motherwell and Wishaw, about how when people think they can get away with things, they sadly do, and do so in some of the most worst instances and examples. But most businesses, I believe, are honourable and do the right thing. But what we have to make sure is the legislation doesn't have holes in it, because those who want to go around doing the right thing will always find holes in legislation to do it. So it's right that this takes time, and it's fabulous this is here today. I know what a crucial issue pregnancy and maternity discrimination truly is, and the pernicious effect it can have on both the immediate and longer-term prospects for women in work, and more generally, the drag it can put on equality and productivity. We heard earlier about the challenges not just on the workplace and on the economy, but also about how this can impact mental health. And I think this is a bill that will not just be there to make a difference in the workplace, but also at home, so that people really truly have a work-life balance, and that means not having to worry about things that they shouldn't need to. Yes, of course, I would love to.
Thank the Honourable Member for giving way. Does he agree with me that obviously it's very, very important to provide women who are pregnant or on maternity leave their workplace protections, but women trying to get pregnant under fertility treatment, do they deserve to have the same employment rights as those who get pregnant naturally?
I know the Honourable Member has done incredible work on her private member's bill in this area, and I know that myself and officials are looking at it very closely, and I applaud her for the work she does, not just on that particular piece of work, but actually generally. I know she's an incredibly staunch and hard-working member for her constituents. That's why I'm pleased to be here today, though. I'm pleased to have taken on this important portfolio for as long as it may last. Hopefully many, hopefully talking years rather than days. But I should say the government is committed, irrelevant of who's at the dispatch box, to ensuring that the UK is the best place in the world to work and grow a business. We need a strong and flexible labour market which supports participation and economic growth. I would like to put on record why the government is supporting this legislation. When we talk about female economic empowerment, we tend to talk about positive facilitative policies, parental leave and pay, flexible working, women on boards and so on, policies looking to drive positive action to achieve good and better outcomes. We are taking huge strides to deliver equal opportunities for women in the UK. These include mandatory pay gap reporting and the largest ever cash increase in national living wage in 2022, and passing the landmark Domestic Abuse Act. It is also pleasing to see that nearly 2 million more women in work since 2010, and women on FTSE 350 boards are up by over 50% in just 5 years. The number of women in FTSE 100 boardroom roles has jumped to 39% when it was originally 12.5% 10 years ago. There is a higher percentage of women on FTSE 350 company boards than ever before. And as my honourable friend from West Bromwich West pointed out, though, there are some very negative statistics that we need to address. I'd love to take them.
I appreciate my friend. And can I just say, can I really welcome him to his position, Mr. Deputy Speaker? Can I just say, when it comes to ministers that should be there, he's absolutely one of them, 1,000%. I'm so glad to see him on the front bench today. Clearly, he's just pointed out that the statistics in other areas are not great. And can he just maybe give a commitment from the government that it is 100% determined to ensure that we get those stats up? Because quite frankly, particularly for the legal profession, 28% of women as partners is simply not good enough. 62% are coming in, 28% are making partner, nowhere near enough. Can he confirm the government's determined to work on those statistics?
I thank my honourable friend for his very kind comments. And absolutely, this is about, equality isn't just for the sake of equality. It actually improves on every level, not just the economy, it improves the workplace, improves the challenge we have in boardrooms, it improves so many things. And I was pleased to hear my honourable friend mentioned that 80% of his own office are women. So I think that's such a powerful example of how we can lead from the front when we are in this place. And we did talk earlier about things like mental health. I noticed over the past few years people talk much more about mental health here, and then we see that they're talking about it much more in the workplace and in society. I think this is one of those really important examples of this. And I remember a few years ago, in a professional capacity, helping support a report by, I think it was the APPG for Women in Parliament. I think it was in 2015. I had a very small role in that, and that was looking at how we can encourage more women into the workplace, but in particular, more women into politics. And I think we need to have that at the front of our minds at all times. On International Women's Day in March this year, we also announced a package of initiatives to help open up more opportunities to women and boost the post-pandemic recovery. This included by promoting transparency and fairness in pay, ending employers asking about salary history, supporting women who want to return to the STEM workforce. And we have an extensive suite of parental leave and pay rights. Parents have access to a range of leave and pay entitlements in the child's first year, giving working families more choice and flexibility about who cares for their child and when. Our maternity leave entitlement is also generous. To qualifying employed women, we offer 52 weeks of maternity leave, of which 39 are paid, which is actually 3 times more than the EU minimum requirement. For self-employed women and those who are not eligible for statutory maternity pay or maternity allowance may also be available. Both of these maternity payments are designed to provide a measure of financial security to help women to stop working towards the end of their pregnancy and in the months after childbirth in the interests of their own and their baby's health and well-being. As well as the positive steps we can encourage or require employers to take. We also need to clamp down on poor and inappropriate practices, like waiting for a woman to return from maternity leave and then terribly ending when the current protected period ends, and then terribly making them redundant, which just is so wrong. We know that one of the key drivers of the gender pay gap is that time that women stay away from work. Ensuring that women are not needlessly forced out of the workplace is therefore an important way of tackling that inequality and of maximising the economic contribution which women can make. As the Honourable and Gallant Member for Barnsley Central has explained to this House, the incidence of pregnancy and maternity discrimination and the poor treatment of pregnant women and new mothers is still far too high. That is an unacceptable position, and that's why this bill is so important. Now, the Honourable Member for Beckenham, who I can't see him in his place, but but I'm sure he'll be listening in from afar. He asked about whether the government will be producing guidance on pregnancy and maternity discrimination advisory boards and the work that's going on here. Of course, I'll take that back, but there definitely will be work to ensure that this is communicated far and wide so that both employers and employees are aware of their rights. I would like to also mention that it was mentioned several times around the House initially by the honourable and gallant member, should I say, for Barnsley Central about the German model. I'm very conscious that there's always a question of can we push this further and faster and do more, and I definitely take his comments on board. I think that the key point, though, is that we don't think it's right to follow that German model. I could happily follow up separately with some specifics on why that the government doesn't agree with going that far, but I do think there's merits in this bill, which means we're definitely taking strides to move towards that direction. I think one of the things that was really powerful during the session today was the personal stories, and I know Emily and Natasha were mentioned, and my condolences and my thoughts go to them on the challenges that they've faced, and hopefully the Honourable and Gallant Member will be aware that his work today will make sure that their stories aren't repeated in the future. The member for Hampstead and Kilburn mentioned about her own friends and the discrimination that they found during their own pregnancies, and I thought that was a really powerful way of bringing to life why this bill is so important. The member for West Bromwich West also asked about the cultural change, and as he alluded to in his intervention just now, this is actually a societal thing. We can change things through legislation, but isn't it much better often to make sure that we change them in society? And this should be the backstop. It shouldn't be the front and centre for businesses. They should just do the right things. Right Honourable Friend for Loughborough did an excellent job, both as my predecessor but also in her comments. I just want to commend her for making sure that we've moved in the right direction on this bill, because as was mentioned by the Honourable Member for Bradford East, getting collaboration around the table for amendments, never mind getting a private member's bill and getting one agreed with the government, is an immense thing to do, and my predecessors very much made sure that this stayed on the table, as it were. The member for Cities of London and Westminster made a point about making sure that we can ensure that women can pursue their careers and continue to do that. That's so essential. Nobody should feel that because they want to have a family, that should end their career. That should never be the situation we live in the 21st century or in any century. And I think what we need to do now is make sure we go full force on this. The member for Chipping Barnet made the point about economic activity and the need to make sure that this is not just about being nice or doing the right thing, but actually has a substantial impact on the bottom line of the economy of this country. My right honourable friend, or my honourable friend, I'm sure he'll be right honourable at some point in the future. He's always right honourable to me. But my honourable friend from Ashfield, as always, so eloquent, always hits the nail on the head with his comments. And he made really important points about ensuring that, if we retain women, we can also navigate some of the challenges around skill shortages. And that's so important, especially when you consider today that we have almost 1 million roles, I believe, available. You know, let's make sure that we promote all opportunities to all people. And the honourable member, as I mentioned earlier, from Motherwell and Wishaw, spoke so eloquently about the challenges she faced many decades ago. And I think hopefully many of those have been addressed in legislation since then, but this will take it even further. So I noted the comment earlier about the tribunal time limits. The honourable member for Bradford East raised this point, and the government recognises concerns that the current 3-month time limit for bringing Equality Act-based cases to Employment Tribunal may not feel like long enough in certain circumstances. In July 2019, we ran a public consultation on whether the limit should be extended, and from the responses we received, it is clear the positive impact that this change could have. The government response, which was published in July 2021, committed to look closely at extending the time limit for bringing the Equality Act 2010-based cases to the Employment Tribunal. The government continues to consider the evidence for extending the time limit for bringing Equality Act 2010-based cases to Employment Tribunal, and we understand the positive impact ultimately that this will have. I will come to close now, Mr. Deputy Speaker. To conclude, these measures will provide invaluable support and protection for parents during an exciting, and it should be an exciting and joyous time in their lives when pregnancy, during pregnancy and for the first period of their child's life, as they juggle work and caring responsibilities. The extension of MAPLE, for example, which I didn't get to come to in my speech, but the extension of MAPLE to pregnancy in a period of return to work is backed by evidence and analysis. Through the government and the EHRC's own research and the work of Women and Equalities Committee and others, there is clearly a need for further work to parents at these times. We must take steps to tackle discrimination and poor treatment some undoubtedly face. The government is pleased to support this private member's bill. It is wholly in line with our ongoing commitment to support workers and build a high-skilled, high-productivity, high-wage economy. The government looks forward to continuing to work with the member for Barnsley Central and, of course, all the new committee members that are sat around the chamber to support the passage of these measures. Thank you, Mr. Deputy Speaker.
And Jarvis.
Thank you, Mr. Deputy Speaker. With the leave of the House, I'll briefly respond to what I think has been an incredibly useful and constructive debate. I have to say, at the end of what by any metric has been quite a long week in this place, I think we've really seen some outstanding contributions from honourable and right honourable members. Everybody who spoke added real value, so I'm incredibly grateful to everybody for the contributions that they made. I also just very quickly want to again thank the EHRC, the TUC, the Royal College of Midwives, Unison, the Forset Society and the CIPD, not just for the invaluable support they provided for the bill, but for the very important work that they do. I also particularly want to thank the Minister, who's been incredibly helpful, as was the previous Minister, as was the Shadow Minister, as have been the officials at the Department, as have been the clerks of the House, as have been my very small team in Parliament, Richard Mitchell and Alex Foy, for all of the hard work that's gone into this bill. As I say, Mr. Deputy Speaker, it's been an incredibly useful debate. Huge amount of really important points that have been raised, too many to mention. I think there is acknowledgement that this is very timely. We all know that our constituents are facing a cost of living crisis, so this is the right moment to be bringing forward this legislation. We should, of course, recognise the pain and suffering of those people who've had to endure the hardship of unfair dismissal in the workplace. As there has been general agreement, raising a family is a difficult but an important job. But it's made, of course, much more difficult when people have to face discrimination in the workplace. So I pay tribute to all who've been fighting against this discrimination, to the extraordinary women who are fighting justice in the courts, organisations like Pregnant Then Screwed and Maternity Action for their dedicated work to protect and enhance the rights of pregnant women. To conclude, Mr. Deputy Speaker, whatever happens today, it will be too late for Emily, Natasha and Sarah, but as the Minister said rightly just a moment ago, their contribution to this process has been incredibly valuable, and I hope that they and all of the other people who've been affected will take some comfort in knowing that they've contributed, hopefully, to a change in the law that will help provide 50,000 women a year with the security of returning to the job after taking maternity leave. I ask the House to support the bill.
The question is that the bill be now read a second time. As many of them say aye. Aye. The contrary, no. I think the ayes have it. The ayes have it. Congratulations, Mr. Jarvis. This is clearly a privilege for me to be chairing this particular debate, but it absolutely demonstrates the House working at its very best.